Enugu state government has announced an ambitious plan to transition from a state with only one electricity distribution company to a commercially viable market, generating over 690 megawatts of electricity and at least a 20-hour power supply by 2030. Well, the secretary to the state government, Professor Chidiebere Onyia, made this known on the sidelines of a roundtable on subnational electricity organized by the Nigeria Governors Forum and the United Kingdom Nigeria Infrastructure Advisory Facility. Onyia, who represented the state governor, said the enactment of the Enugu State Electricity Law would create an enabling environment for energy players and investors to grow the state's GDP from the present $4.4 billion to $30 billion.
Our key objective for doing this is to ensure there's reliability of power. That will also be a catalyst for private sector actors to feel the comfort to come to Enugu. Enugu State's plan is to be one of the top 3 investor-focused locations in Nigeria. And to do that, you have to make sure that you have a constant supply of power, reliable power, and also to encourage the market where they feel like the power arrangement is governed by a process that's both constitutional and also has the right policy backing it. That was the reason why His Excellency decided to drive this process for his team, for Enugu to be one of the leading states to be able to set up an electricity market.
I think it's important also to say that the roundtable can help understanding of how donors can support electricity sector reforms, including those representing the World Bank and the African Development Bank.
And collaborating with a number of development partners, very experienced in this area. A new electricity ecosystem has been created by a new legal environment. And what we're doing here is trying to benefit from the experiences of a number of other countries.
We're joined now by the Secretary to the Enugu State Government, Professor Chidiebere Onyia. Good to see you and thanks for your time. Electricity is one very aspect of our national life that everyone talks about. Now, there are laws enabling states now to now go ahead and fix this logjam. What's this talk about Enugu State, looking at the infrastructure that you have in place that ultimately may help drive your GDP from $4.4 billion to about $30 billion?
Yes, so His Excellency, when he came into office, had set out a very ambitious plan. And that plan was to help grow our GDP from the 4.4 to 30 billion. But we also understood very earlier on that this is not going to be something that would drive without a private sector investment coming into the state. But for that to happen, we needed to do the things a state needs to do to de-risk the investment climate. We also needed to build strong institutions, ensure that the ease of doing business is institutionalized. We also needed to step back and ask ourselves, what would a private sector player be looking for? Security is one of it. Another one would be reliable power supply. And keeping in mind that the distribution companies get a limited pool of power from the Transition Company of Nigeria as allocated, that in itself an approximate 70 megawatts of power coming into the state on a good day. Then we're looking at a projection growth of about 690 megawatts. For where we are to where we need to go, we understand clearly that private sector investors have to come into generation space. And to do that, we needed to create an enabling law. So we started the process of creating that law by first setting out a policy statement that outlines what Enugu State sees going forward, not in the short term, but in the short to the long term. And we also now stood back and asked ourselves, within this plan, what would be a very credible and realistic way to implement it. So there was a blueprint built into the policy that outlines what will happen at every stage of the process. So that is what now led to the stakeholder engagement that eventually turned the executive bill that was submitted to our House into the Enugu State Electricity Law that allows us to now set up our own electricity market, which we feel is very important for us to drive investors into Enugu State. Catalyze investment, we need power, reliable power.
Absolutely, you couldn't be more correct. But in terms of modalities and the specific things that you're putting on ground to provide this enabling environment that you talk about? What are the specifics really? And, to what extent do they address the local investor and even the foreign investor? What are some of those?
So what we did at the very beginning, recall on the 1st of September, we had an investment roundtable.
Right.
And in that roundtable, part of what we did was also to find out what investors were looking for. And on our own side, His Excellency had agreed that set out a number of new ministries that could lead to this innovation. We had things going on, but they were not optimized. So how do we optimize that process? First, we needed to have a ministry in itself that overlooks that, the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources, where the power process will be encompassed as a ministry. We also have now started the process of setting up our regulator. And that's the key aspect of driving all the processes. So we are at that stage right now. So we have the framework at the end of it. The regulator will drive the whole process, both the regulatory, the financial aspect of it. And we're also talking to a few DFIs and IFIs that will help us with the payment guarantee consortium that will plan to sit on the back end of this process. So we're very clear in our minds which institutions will drive it. They're aligned in the policy. The law supports that being part of our electricity market in Enugu. So we're taking it step by step to ensure that we build the institution, make it credible, autonomous as a regulator ought to be, and then they will now drive the process of licensing and the rest of the activities that sit in the market.
Let me see if I can, because you use the word it's an ambitious one, and sometimes it may look so easy. Electricity first came to Nigeria 94 years ago, yes. 1929. Have you thought about, and you also mentioned the discos, have you thought about the real problems? Because it goes beyond transmission not giving enough. It goes into the infrastructure they inherited from the old NEPA by some of these discos. How much of investment have you looked into to seeing that these people can help so that when you ultimately generate, they can take them and give to the people?
So what we're doing as a state is creating the environment that is necessary. Enugu State is not setting up an electricity market to be the driver. The private sector will drive it. The private investment will drive the process. It's risky for the government to get into the process of running the market because it takes away the credibility. We learned quite a few lessons from what has happened in the center. Most of us have been here in the process from the handover of the legacy assets into the new distribution framework. So we took quite a bit of lessons from what has happened, and things that have not gone well, we try to manage their visibility in our market by diminishing redundancies and ensuring that we are focused on those things that you talked about.
And how is that conversation going?
So it's going very well. That's what has led to where we are now, where a lot of multilateral development finance institutions are becoming part of our conversation around how to make our market viable. And it's the viability that will decide how long these investors are able to last in the space. So we're very clear and conscious of that, and it's part of the lessons learned. It's not about the distribution, the transmission. There's a lot of issues that sit on the downstream that we're also addressing from our plan, and it's an ongoing thing, and it's dynamic because there's each state has its own context. Right. We have our own expectations. We're sitting on a gas well, a lot of gas wells across the Anambra to Nsukka basins. We're also looking at a strong coal resource in Enugu and other things, but we're mindful because we're in the process of creating our climate action plan, our climate policy. We're also looking at aligning to the energy transition plan here at the center and the NDC's, the 2060 target for the nationally determined contribution. So we're mindful of these key things to make sure that there's a balance. But right now, the investors are the people who want to drive it. For instance, our special agro-processing zones, they will need power. And in the investors coming in, they will now what we do is facilitate that handshake between those that will consume this and then those that were generated. It reduces the risk of government interference, so it becomes a business to business.
Great.
So that's our thinking around in Enugu State on how we can make our market viable.
And I'm glad you talk about, you know, the fact that you're mindful of the, you know, climate change, the need to look at carbon, you know, footprint and all of that. Yes. That means you're looking at renewable energy as a more sustainable way going forward. Yes. But Enugu has the coal mine. What are you going to be doing with that? Are you discarding it totally, or are you going to be exploring even that to provide electricity?
We're mindful about the resource we have in Enugu State, but we're also conscious where the world is going. So there's a just transition to everything. It's not discarding, but it's finding the technologies that are important to make sure that the emission levels are reduced to the minimal point. And also by now beginning to do things around reforestation, building carbon credit out of our forest reserve areas. So what we're doing is where there is emission, we also have areas that we've designated to help us manage this. So we're conscious about balancing both realities, because yes, we sit on a large coal base. It's a big resource, but we also keep in mind that till now, we've not had a lot of coal-fired power plants in the southeast. So we're mindful of what that can be perceived with development partners, with global actors. But we do know that even some of them that had, you know, an adverse feeling to coal has now in the recent times started thinking about how do we do this with minimal implications for the environment. So we're very mindful of that.
Fantastic. Chidiebere Onyia is the secretary to the Enugu State Government. Professor Chidiebere Onyia, so good to have you on Newsnet.
Thank you so much.